there's so many things where I'm just like, wow, it is terrible. And this is where I get to your column too. I'm going to object to your column, is that the number of things that people are pulling their hair out about and saying we're trundling down the road to fascism are completely boringly standard in almost every other country on earth, particularly in Europe. I mean, you have Graham Linehan, a comedian who did Father Ted, being arrested by 5 armed police officers. You might know that people in England who are police are not armed. Right. But at the airport, they come 5 armed guys for tweeting something about some trans thing. I don't even know exactly what it was, some joke. But he was arrested, and he has to go to court for that. If that happened here under Donald Trump, we would be like, where are the Nazis? This is the jackboots. But there's so much garbage out there in Europe. I lived in Europe for a long time that really alarmed me, that made me come back home and be like much more patriotic. It's like, it's much easier to live here in certain ways. Now we can talk about healthcare and mass transit and all that stuff. Right. Smaller countries, it's different. But as far as just like general human freedom, I always was happy to be home. But to your column, the premise of your column is that people say Donald Trump is a fascist. They don't say that because the media is convincing of it. It's because he acts like a fascist. Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, no, let me reframe it in the way that I intended.
Yeah. Well, that was the headline.
The point of the column was, I'm right, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think,
very fascist of you.
So one of the things that I noticed after sort of like the Kimmel thing was that a growing argument on the right was that the left-wing media is to blame for this because they are irresponsibly saying that Trump is a fascist.
Yeah.
And my argument was, I allowed the fact, don't touch me, I allowed the fact that, yes, the left has been sort of irresponsible, but that overlooks the fact that Trump has acted really authoritarian. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that he is doing things that are absolutely fascist. Now, the problem is, I think a lot of people, when you say fascist, they immediately think Hitler and Holocaust, or maybe Mussolini. And really, that's irresponsible. Trump is not Hitler. But in terms of the what he's doing in sort of like undermining the press, sort of vilifying his enemies, there's a long list of things that he's doing. He is acting in an authoritarian way.
You're right about the second bit, but that's a different word. Is he authoritarian or is he a fascist? I object to the fascism thing. And I object to it for a bunch of reasons. But when you say somebody silences dissent, goes after the media, has a personality cult, that's Hugo Chavez, right? Is he a communist? Right. It's Fidel Castro. It's Joseph Stalin.
But right? by definition of fascism, those guys are fascists. They're also communists.
Maybe,
communists.
But, yeah.
I mean, we're playing a little bit of a semantic game of.
Well, that's why I think these polls that people cite are essentially useless, because 89% of people think this. 50, when it comes to fascism. None of them know what fascism means. Well, scholars can't agree on what fascism is.
But that poll was being used by Eric Schmidt, who's a MAGA influencer, who said, look, the problem is the media is ginning up this fascist narrative. And Elon Musk retweeted that and said that that's terribly concerning, and that's really problematic. And so you're right. I think people don't understand that, but I think objectively, if you look at the things that Trump is doing, he's not Hitler, he's not Mussolini. He's doing things that are very, very outside the norm, that are illiberal, that are outside the norm.
For sure, outside the norms,
for sure. Authoritarian, and what's the difference between authoritarianism and fascism?
A lot, because there are non-fascists who are authoritarians, right? I mean, there are communists who are authoritarians. Fascism, I would say...
Would you argue that what he's doing is not fascist?
Absolutely not. 100% not.
But 100% don't you see the parallels between what he's doing with, say, like...
Well, I see the parallels of what he's doing with a lot of people.
Press and the fake news and the press are the enemy of the people?
Yeah, but there's a lot of people that do that, right? There's a lot of authoritarians that do that. You seem surprised by this.
I am.
Well, I'll tell you what. A cop-out argument is to say that it's not Mussolini and Hitler. If you ask 90% of people... what a fascist is, do you think they're going to say Salazar in Portugal? You know what you're going for when you say fascist. No. It's supposed to be redolent of Hitler. That's why you're doing it. Well, that's why you're doing it.
So I added that caveat, and I agree with you. And I actually even said, like, this says more about the declining standards of U.S. education. Yeah. So I agree with that. And so
why choose fascist? Because you're trying to evoke the worst possible people you can think of without exactly saying Hitler. Because you're not, I mean, not even Mussolini. I mean, you're not talking about Franco. I mean, because, you know, Trump isn't a Catholic. He's not a Catholic fascist or a Catholic authoritarian.
So your argument is that the media correctly calling him fascist should temper their message because the audience is dumb.
It's not correctly calling him fascist.
I fully disagree with you.
But what is fascist?
I think the media has a responsibility to speak truth to people who get
everything
it,
that you listed,
soften their message.
Everything that you listed applies to Castro, applies
no.
to Stalin.
I like the spirited conversation.
Yeah.
You just argued that like people don't get the real definition.
They don't.
But that's their fault. Like you can't blame the media for calling truth.
Okay,
like
so you're gonna honestly sit across from me and tell me that when people are calling Donald Trump a fascist, when there's probably more precise words, authoritarian works, that's fine. Why not use that? Because you were using them interchangeably. So why use fascist?
I think
it's evocative of something.
They're fairly interchangeable. I don't think. I think fascism is. I think
not all authoritarians are fascist. All fascists are authoritarian.
Okay, fair. But I don't. And I say in my column, like, not all fascists are Hitler or Mussolini. There is a spectrum of fascism.
That's not what it's supposed to evoke.
No, because you're taking.
No one is thinking like, oh, I just mean
No.
Franco.
This is where you're wrong. This is where you're wrong.
No one's trying to say that.
You're taking your own definition of what fascism is and applying it to how everyone understands that. And I'm using the strict definition that you would be in an academic book.
But you're not even this.
I'm treating the word. I'm treating the word and people like they understand what the definition is and not what you think it is as something worse than it is. I think you're being I think you're just as bad as like Greg Gutfeld saying.
Goodness.
Yes, because you're saying like, it's irresponsible to say this word that's factually true.
No, it's not factually true. You're saying things that are authoritarian. You haven't said corporatism once, which is what the basis of fascism is.
No, you're just something else.
No. You're asking for a definition of fascism. You gave me definitions that also apply to other authoritarian regimes, right?
Right.
I'm saying something that's very specific that does not apply to other authoritarian regimes, which is corporatism, which is what Italian fascism was, and that's the mingling of state, particularly in economics. That is the same thing of true of Hitler. That is kind of true also of Salazar and Franco and the Iberian Peninsula, but we're saying it for a very simple reason. It's because it's redolent of Hitler. We're not doing it because it's so precise, because everything that you've said can also be applied by calling him a Stalinist, by calling him a Chavista, by calling him somebody who follows Maduro, the Sandinistas.
But those are authoritarian. Those are specific to those leaders.
Authoritarian tendencies.
Well, I need a cigarette after that now.
I'm vaping. So do we have a vape for him?
No, I don't. No, I'm good. I don't vape.
No, it's okay. You're wrong. That's fine. You can just admit that you're wrong and that you're doing it because you're trying to make people think of Hitler.
I like to aim for a smarter audience. You and I are different in that way.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like,
I aim for the one that has the definition of fascism at their fingertips.
I think this gets to the essence of the challenge we have, is that you and I in the world, every individual in this kind of like postmodern world has their own definition of words as they see it. We can't agree on basic definitions. My argument in that column was that fascism, in a pure academic sense, that was not, as I think you said, redolent of Hitler.
Yeah.
I argued that you're right. That's a problem. But the problem is...
You don't think people are trying to make that connection by saying fascism?
I think Joy Reid was doing that. I think a lot of the extremists on the right, and I honestly said that in the piece, and I probably could have made that argument better, that the left created a problem of their own doing by precisely that argument. That said, what Trump is doing is factually close. Like, there's a lot of evidence that he's being fascistic, and the Jimmy Kimmel, Brendan Carr thing is the best example. And I know that you agree with that, and there's concern there. But I think if we're sort of going to debate the semantic meaning of fascism, what does that say about this?
We have to, because it's a word with a definition.
Right, but I think we're losing sight of the forest through the trees. Look, I'm not.
You can. I
think there's plenty of room to criticize the media for the way that they've irresponsibly portrayed Trump. So that we're finally at this place where the fascist wolf has arrived, and no one cares because he's been irresponsibly called a fascist since 2017. And I think that the 2025 project version of second-term Trump is actually fascist. And we're no one's freaking the fuck out.
I think there are a lot of people freaking out.
You're not.
No, I'm not. And the reason I'm not is not because I think that this is a great time to be an American and a great time for American governance. I mean, I think that this stuff waking up to the reactions, especially to the news about Kimmel,
revealing.
was revealing. And it's
Yeah.
terrifying in a lot of ways, because I have a lot of people that I don't really have a side, but I say that there's people that tend to be people I trust or my allies on things not being that, in making excuses for this and saying, well, his ratings were low, he was going out of business anyway, so we'll let it go. What conservatives should be doing, and I'm not one of them, but what conservatives should be doing, is my tip for you guys, is be arguing that the FCC is antiquated and should be eliminated, and the government has no business getting involved in these broadcast bans that made sense when they were limited in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. That is a concept that should be gotten rid of. Conservatives hate government power, theoretically, but they love government power now when Brennan Carr can use that government power to turn the screws on people that they disagree with. I think that is horrible stuff. I think there's previous examples of it in America. I think this is one of the worst ones that I've seen, especially in modern times. But the good thing that has given me a bit of, taking away some of the sleepless nights about this stuff, is the courts have been pretty rough on Trump. And so far, with some exceptions, particularly when it comes to immigration, they've had to contend with that. And they haven't said, fuck you, we're just going to be a fascist. Because what fascists do is they disable the court.
Well,
the first thing that the Nazis
You're right. And so okay, everything you said I agreed with. And I appreciate that. I will say a lot of the court decisions have trended in a way that have upheld what I think to be our constitutional rights. However, I think there's a lot of stuff that remains as it goes up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is largely conservative, and that is sort of that's the bull.
The MAGA people they think Amy Coney Barrett is one of the worst people to ever live.
Oh, the irony.
They hate half of these people because, we have 9-0 decisions, a whole bunch of them recently. Right. You've had people on the conservative side of the court that have flipped, and there's been 5-4 decisions. There's been, all sorts of, and I have a certain amount of trust, not in all of them. I think some are more trustworthy than others, but I think they generally try to be outside of politics, generally.
Right.
And I think that there's less of that in the past, when, Scalia and Ginsburg would go, do a pie eating contest together, or whatever the hell they did, and be best friends. They were very close. Yeah.
Pie eating contest?
Yeah, that was
that's your go-to.
Yeah, no, that was Ginsburg was huge she was very, very famous into pie eating. I can't believe you didn't know that.
That's your reference.
Yeah.
I like it.
She was the Kobayashi of pie eating.
I was thinking the opening little short in Stand By Me, where Danny Hogan barf at a Barforama.
That's they did that too. The liberal media doesn't report on it. They don't. It's unbelievable.